So hello and welcome to this short training video on school boards of adjudication for academic misconduct. I'm Paul Cruikshank, I'm the Associate Dean Students for Faculty of Science, and together with Shona Chilis, my counterpart for Arts and Divinity, and Charles Warren, who's the Associate Provost Students that looks after PG matters, we're responsible for good academic practice in the university. So the university expects, requires and promotes a culture of good academic practice. And if it sounds like I'm just quoting from something, that's because I am. This is a direct quote from the university policy and good academic practice. And there's a link to that policy document on the next slide, but that really informs and underpins the process that we're going to talk about today. So that policy lays out what's expected of students and indeed what's expected of staff when it comes to looking at good academic practice, and it defines academic misconduct. And all of our students will complete, upon matriculation, some mandatory training on good academic practice, i.e. the TGAP. So useful documentation, everyone loves a good policy document, and the good academic practice policy lays out very clearly what's expected, defines academic misconduct and the procedures that we go through when it's suspected. Also, you can find a linked guidance document for staff. There's also a guidance document for students, and very important for the subject of this video is a procedure document on how to run boards of adjudication for academic misconduct. You can find all these things in the governance zone. You can also find them from the link in the middle of this slide, where you see links to all of these relevant policies and also various template documents for minutes of boards of adjudication, communication letters to students, and so on. And if you ever have any questions about academic misconduct or good academic practice, then please email goodacpractice@standrews.ac.uk. So what is academic misconduct? So these are the various forms of academic misconduct defined in the policy in good academic practice. I'm not going to list all of them. Some of these are more common than other ones. So if academic misconduct is suspected, and it's usually going to be suspected by a member of staff looking at a piece of work, then you should inform the school or departmental academic misconduct officer, AMO, and then if the AMO determines that there's a case to answer, they may issue a written warning, or they may refer to a school or a university board of adjudication. And an AMO would refer a suspected case of misconduct to board of adjudication if they believe there's a case to answer, and if a possible penalty might be more than a written warning. So boards of adjudication are one of the processes used to decide on allegations of academic misconduct. And the purpose of the board is to determine whether academic misconduct has occurred, i.e. whether an allegation of academic misconduct should be upheld, and also to determine an appropriate sanction. On a school level board, any member of academic staff may be asked to take part, but they need to have done this training. University level boards are usually, but not always, but usually only academic misconduct officers participating. So what does the board look like? So the board members are appointed by a relevant head of school or director of teaching, and the board consists of a convener and at least one further member of academic staff. And the convener must have previously participated in a school board and also done the training. A decision to uphold academic misconduct is done on the basis of a strict majority, so there may be advantages to having more than one member of staff beyond the convener. And the convener is a person who does a lot of the administrative legwork for the board. But there's more people that actually attend the board than the convener, so there'll be the convener, other board members, a clerk, academic misconduct officer, a student. The student's entitled to bring along with them a representative, and also witnesses are allowed but not very common. So how does the Board of Adjudication work? So boards should normally be conducted according to a format laid out in the minutes template document, which you can find from that link that we had a few slides ago to the various policy documents. But broadly speaking, the convener will welcome the student, introduce the participants, then they'll explain the purpose of the board, outline some decision timescales, state the allegation and explain how the board's going to work. The AMO will then present the case, the student can respond, then the board members can ask questions of both the student and the AMO. Then there'll be some final comments from the AMO and then some final comments from the student. And then after the board is concluded, the board will debrief, agree a decision, and if that decision is to uphold the allegation of academic misconduct, then agree a sanction. So what do these various people at the board do? So the convener's role, before the board, they'll receive details of the case from the AMO, they'll arrange a time, a venue, a clerk for the board, they'll communicate with the student and board members and the AMO, they'll discuss procedure before the board with the board members. Then during the board, they've got the various duties we just saw on the previous slide. Then after the board, they'll liaise with Good Academic Practice Act to have the minutes of the board and a decision and an outcome letter approved. And then following that, they'll notify the student of the outcome and copy in appropriate people, all as outlined in the policy document. So what does the board member do? Well, the board members, including the convener obviously, are there to consider and indeed question the evidence presented by the AMO and also any evidence presented by the student. The board members will participate in deciding whether the allegation is to be upheld, and this is done on the balance of probabilities, not beyond reasonable doubt. And in reaching a conclusion on whether academic misconduct has occurred, then extenuating circumstances aren't relevant. As mentioned a couple of slides ago, upholding the allegation requires a strict majority, so this might be a good reason to have a total of 3 board members rather than the minimum 2 required. If the allegation is upheld, then board members will also participate in deciding what the penalty can be. And for a school board of adjudication, penalties can be a written warning or capping the grade of that piece of assessment at 7 or a 0 for that piece of assessment. And although extenuating circumstances aren't considered when deciding whether academic misconduct has occurred, they can be considered when deciding what the penalty should be. And, when deciding on a penalty, board members can refer to a substantial set of case studies that are available to staff on the university website. So what does the AMO do? Well, before the board, when an allegation is raised by a colleague, then an AMO will decide whether there's a case to answer. And if there isn't a case to answer, then they'll just dismiss the allegation. If there is a case to answer, then they'll check for previous cases with the GAP office, and then they can either issue a written warning, as I mentioned earlier, or refer to the school or university board, and then they'll present evidence to any subsequent board. So there's some important timescales in this process. So once the convener has been appointed, then there's a maximum of 15 working days until the board meets, and students need a minimum of 5 working days notice. Then once the board is concluded, there's a maximum of 5 working days for the student to receive the outcome, and that has to include the time for the convener to liaise with Good Act Practice to have the minutes and an outcome letter approved. And then if an allegation is upheld, then there's a maximum time of 5 working days from the student being notified that the allegation is upheld to retaking the TGAP module. But any questions, please just ask the Academic Misconduct Officer or GUDAC Practice at standrews.ac.uk. And here, just once again, is that link to the useful set of policy documents and case studies and template letters. Once you finish watching this recording, please confirm via email to GUDAC Practice to be added to the register of trained staff. And any questions, don't hesitate to contact GUDAC Practice. Really appreciate the time that you've taken to do this. The more people that we have that can be asked to take part in school boards of adjudication, the more widely we can spread the workload, essentially.